Going to talk about stacked nostril piercings today. Going to go through the pros and cons, 5 of each. And then I'm going to cover what you should know beforehand, getting the piercing, healing the piercing, jewelry, living with the piercing, and what happens if you don't want it anymore. Coming up next on Pros and Cons by a Piercer, Season 2, Episode number 89. For those who are new to the channel, welcome to the Body Piercing and Tattooing channel. Hope you enjoyed the video. Somebody find him helpful and useful, but you may not know who this handsome feller is. My name is DaVo. I'm a professional body piercer and have been since 1994. I own and operate the Axiom Body Piercing Studio located right here in Des Moines, Iowa, inside Skin Kitchen Tattoo. For those who don't know, a stacked nostril piercing is a piercing that's done kind of up and down or at an angle. It's usually one piercing done above the other. However, it can also refer to doing multiple nostril piercings on one side. It really comes down to your anatomy, how much room there is to work with, and what you really want it to look like. I've done quite a few different designs, including like triangles. One girl, we were working on trying to do a star, but kind of ran out of space and kind of went with this other kind of thing with some different jewelry. But there's a lot of different options you can go for with this one. As far as the history of nostril piercings, they date back about 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. Were first recorded in the Middle East. There's mentions in the Bible for nostril piercings in Genesis 24:22. Has a history in Indian culture dating back to the 16th century. The piercing is also represented in African and North American tribes, or tribal cultures. In modern times, it's been heavily associated with, it's probably one of the most common or socially accepted piercings on the planet. Heavily done since probably the 80s during the modern rise of body piercing. Now let's get into the pros, the advantages, things that make you go, yes, I need that in my life. Starting with number 1. Very socially acceptable. Even though stacked navels are kind of pushing the boundary a little bit, most nostril piercings are pretty accepted. They're pretty widely done. People aren't going to be freaked out by them. They're probably going to find it more interesting that you have more than one. But for the most part, this isn't something that's really out there. Number 2 has a long history of healing fairly easily. This is not a piercing that's very difficult or is prone to rejection or migration or other problems that are associated with many piercings. Usually you heal out pretty quick and with little or no problems. Number 3, it opens up the door to different patterns and designs, different placements that can create shapes and etc. and accent the nose or create something that looks completely different and can be changed with jewelry too. Number 4, a large variety of different jewelry styles, especially with the threadless jewelry fronts. There's thousands upon thousands upon thousands of different ends that you can put on this. There is lots of different designs. When it comes to rings, there's quite a few different ones too. So you have a lot of variety when it comes to nostril piercings, partly because they're so popular. And the last one, number 5, enhances and draws attention to the nose and that area, enhances or beautifies it. Especially with patterns, you can go into the shape of the nose, how that natural ridge is, and kind of just add to what is already there. Now let's move on to the cons, the disadvantages, things that make you go, nope. Starting with number 1, affects employment and playing organized sports or anything that requires a dress code. This varies from place to place and organization to organization, but if you're involved with anything that has a dress code, chances are there's something in there about piercing. This is something you definitely want to check before getting the piercings done, and it may, having 2 of them stacked might go against that, while having 1 is fine. Just talk to the people in charge. Number 2, can't sleep on it while it's healing. Yes, you don't want to sleep on this. That leads to bumps and other fun problems that you don't want to have. Number 3, can't wear makeup in the area. Also, you want to avoid the area. You want to avoid moisturizers, fragrances, cleansers, etc. You kind of have to avoid the area. Number 4, there's more of them, so they're more noticeable. You're not going to be as stealth, so to speak. People will notice these more readily because there are more shiny objects there. And number 5, the jewelry will need to be oversized during the healing process. If you have an existing one, that may also need to be oversized just to make sure there's room for the swelling, depending on how close together the piercings are and how much you are prone to swelling. This will also require at some point downsizing the jewelry to a smaller piece. Now let's talk about preparing for the piercing and what you should look for. First thing is you need to find a piercer that's experienced, well-knowledged, can read your anatomy really well, gives out a consultation verbally, gives out aftercare instructions that verbally and in writing, and is going to be there if there's any problems or concerns in the future. If you are planning on wearing a ring in this particular piercing, you do need to discuss that beforehand so that it can be placed in a way that you're not going to end up with a ring this big. Understand that rings are perfect circles. If it has to be wide enough to go around the bottom of it, it's going to be that way outward. So if you want something really dainty and small, you need to discuss that with your piercer and see if that's even possible. And the other thing is you can't wear a ring in this for probably a minimum of 6 months. I would suggest more closer to a year without causing issues. Now let's talk about the piercing experience itself. First thing we do is we go through a consultation that's going to cover risks that are involved, what it's going to take to heal it, average healing time, cross-contamination prevention, changes in habits, or anything that may affect the piercing during that healing time. After you've gone through that, we'll pick out some jewelry. Personally, with this one, we do them all here at the Axiom with a flat-back labrae stud, threadless, with threadless fronts. It's kind of becoming slowly but surely the industry standard. Everything is made of titanium on top of that, but that's kind of the level that you want to look for. These can be done with nostril screws and L-bends. They're just not the best option. Piercers should then check your anatomy, make sure that it's possible, and then go through the process of having you fill out the waiver. Waivers have a tendency to ask a lot of questions that may seem a little bit personal. It's going to ask about things like pre-existing medical conditions, medications, and et cetera, and release the piercer from some liability. This is mainly to if you do have one of these issues, it's best to talk to your piercer about it. If the piercer doesn't have the correct answer or they don't feel comfortable with it, I would suggest talking to a physician or medical professional before you get it done. We don't have access to the amount of knowledge that they do, how a medication is going to affect clotting, etc. It's really something you need to talk to them about. Once that's all done and we're all set, I'll wash my hands. Then we will disinfect the tray, set up a sterile bib, or what do they call them? I don't know. It's not a bib. It's a drape. That's what I'm thinking of. Not the kind you put over the windows. Put that down and then start putting all the tools that we're going to be using and the jewelry, etc., all the sterile items on there. Once they're all on there, don a set of gloves, unwrap everything, set it up, get it ready to go. Sometimes in some studios, they will just do one setup for every piercing where they autoclave everything loose and then pull it out. That would be the other option. Then once all that's set up, we disinfect the area, mark it, have you take a look at it. It's always best to look at marks up close and at arm's length. Most people are going to see you at arm's length. They're not going to see you right here. So it's best to kind of get that perception at arm's length. Even have the piercer hold the mirror back for you if need be. Next, I'll put you in a reclined position. We like to use a cork hair. Some people use needle receiving tubes. You inject the needle in and through the nostril. The nostril is then, if you're using an L-bend or a nostril screw, you just press it against the back of the needle and hope that it doesn't separate as you push the needle out. With flatback labraes or threadless jewelry, we'll use a guide pin to push the needle out, and then put the jewelry on the inside, push it through, and then put the front on. We'll stop any bleeding that may occur. Usually at nostrils, it really depends on the needle it's used, and it also depends on the type of jewelry. Most cases, you're not going to see a lot of bleeding. Occasionally you do. It's going to be tender to the touch. It's going to maybe some throbbing and aching for about 10 or 15 minutes afterwards. And then it's going to be more of a, if you bump it, kind of know it situation. Usually not too bad. Now, if you're doing 2 of these in one sitting, you're doing the stacked one, then, of course, we repeat. And understand that pain-wise, they can increase a little bit on the second one. It can be a little bit more touchy than the first. The other thing is, nostril piercings are almost, I would say, 99% of the time will cause your eyes to water. That's just part of the natural process of getting this done. It doesn't mean you're a wimp. It doesn't mean you're crying. It's just part of getting your nostril pierced. Now let's talk about healing. Average healing time on this is going to be 8 to 12 weeks, during which time I would suggest cleaning twice daily with a sterile saline spray. Here at the Axiom, we sell Neomed's Piercing Aftercare. That's what I generally suggest. Comes out in a fine mist, easy to use. However, in your part of the world or wherever, it may not be available. So there are options on the market. What you mainly want to look for is that it's in a pressurized can. It says sterile on the packaging. And when you turn it over and look at the ingredients, all you're seeing there is purified water and sodium chloride. No preservatives, no additives, nothing else. If there is, chances are it's not sterile. There's no reason to have all that other crap in there. Biggest difference you'll find from manufacturer to manufacturer and type to type is how that saline is delivered. The nice thing about the Piercing Aftercare is it comes out in a fine mist. So you just mist the area, let it stay in contact for 5 minutes. That's all you need to do. With the other kinds, some of them come out like a super sucker. They have a high-pressure nozzle. With that, compresses are probably a better option. To do that, I would suggest using a sterile piece of gauze sponge. Personally, I like the Johnson & Johnson 2x2s. Saturate to the area and then lay it against the area for about 5 to 10 minutes, twice daily. Both of these you want to do twice daily. The other thing I suggest is once a day at the end of your shower, pull your hair and everything out of the way and let the water flow over the area for about 30 seconds. What you're doing when you're doing this is these 2 things is you're removing that discharge that hardens collects on the jewelry, the crusties. The reason we want them off there is when the jewelry shifts or moves, it can agitate it. It also doesn't feel very good. It can be kind of painful. So if you get a situation where you seem like there's an excessive amount of the discharge or just doesn't want to come off, I generally suggest going and seeing your piercer, have them take a look at it, have them clean it for you to make sure there's not something else going on. What you do not want to do is run to the medicine cabinet and start pulling out everything tipped in cotton or with a sharp point or was suggested by a stranger on the internet and start digging around in there. You're going to cause problems. Cross-contamination prevention. Common sense stuff. Wash your hands before you handle it. No oral contact. No exchange of bodily fluids. Keeping your environment clean. Clothing, bedding, towels. Do not submerge the piercing in bodies of water you can't control the quality of, which is pretty much everything but your own clean bathtub. A lot of people will say, oh, no, you're fine after a week or 2. The reality is a piercing is an open wound until it's healed. Any body of water that you can submerge your whole body in and move around in is going to be filled with microorganisms regardless of what type of treatment they use. Meaning that you have an open wound, there's foreign pathogens, they can work their way into the piercing, they can cause an infection. The other problem with it is the chemicals can cause problems too. I know mom told you that it was good to have that scabbed up knee in the water for 2 hours. The reality is it isn't. Keep pets away from it. Don't let them sleep in the bed with you, especially smaller animals like to sleep up by your face and still your breath while you're sleeping. Do not sleep on the piercing. Make sure you're sleeping on your side or your back. This one, you can kind of squish the pillow to one side in some cases, but it's usually best just to kind of get used to sleeping. If you do your right side, sleeping on your left. It's just a good idea. Keep cosmetics away from the area, powder-based makeups, etc. If you use a type of cleansers or moisturizers, I would keep it away from the area too. If you use anything in your hair that comes out of a spray can, shield it with a folded-up paper towel when you apply it during the healing process. Downsizing. And I'll go a little bit, well, probably. Anyway, I always cover this list like 4 times. Jewelry. You're going to be pierced in most cases with, like I said, a flat back Libre stud. We usually pierce with something that's too long. You need to downsize in roughly about 6 to 8 weeks to a shorter post. And the reason being is we want to limit the amount of movement you have, and also it's going to make it more comfortable. It's not going to get caught on things as readily, etc. If you have a situation where it's constantly getting caught or it's causing problems, go see your piercer before that 6 weeks is up and see if you can get it changed sooner. With nostril screws and L-bends, you want to limit contact with the area. Be very cautious, especially with towels and changing clothing. They tend to catch on those things, and then they fly across the room, and then you're forcing the jewelry back through into a healing piercing, which usually just disrupts everything and starts the healing process all over again. Jewelry. Leave the piece in until it is healed. After it's healed, you can take it out and replace another piece. However, you do release something in it pretty much consistently, only taking out to replace. The thing with it is nostril piercings, regardless of how long you've had them, can close pretty rapidly. So it's a good idea if you like it or like them, leave something in the piercings. If you change jewelry often and you have threadless jewelry, some things I would suggest investing in are hemostats, very, very thin ones, the mosquito style, flat if you can find them, threadless guide pins, and ask your piercer to kind of show you how to bend ends. They can be a little tricky at first, and they can be kind of a pain in the ass, but the tools make it a lot easier. With nostril screws and L-bends, they are usually kind of loose on purpose to allow for the swelling. They can be adjusted. Bending that jewelry all the time and messing with them can be a complete pain in the ass, especially if you're using titanium, and it can be damaged fairly easy, scratched, etc. So it's usually best to just buy a pre-bent to a tighter, going back to your piercer and have them just start out with a new piece of jewelry instead of trying to rebend what's there. Rings. You want to wait at least 6 months to a year before changing out to rings. They need to be wide enough so that the area inside the piercing is flat enough and to wrap all the way around the bottom of the piercing comfortably. With rings, the styles I suggest are hinged rings. They're probably the easiest to deal with. Seamless or beaded rings and captive bead rings. Never, ever put silver in your nostril. Silver will erode over time. Your nose is a mucous membrane. It will absorb what's called silver salts, and that can lead to silver poisoning, which is a permanent marking, usually a ring around it. That's a bluish black color. The only way it can be really removed is to have it surgically removed. So no sterling, no silver. Living with the piercing. Jewelry should be left in at all times, of course. Avoid pressure and trauma to the piercing. Even though it's healed, you shouldn't be banging it against things, grabbing it, etc. You need to kind of isolate the area and let the piercing be. It is hard metal through soft tissue. Not a good combination if it gets caught. Always adjust or change jewelry that's super loose fitting. In the long run, it'll be more comfortable and less of a problem. Sometimes over time, makeup and etc. will build up on the jewelry. Usually going to see your piercer and having it cleaned with an ultrasonic tank is your best option. However, you can usually clean it up maybe with some warm water and salt and a good toothbrush if you feel comfortable with having the jewelry out long enough to do that. And lastly, abandoning the piercing. Let's say you've just gotten to a point in your life where you're just like, I don't want this anymore. It shouldn't be a problem if there's no signs of issue, regardless if it's healing or not. If it looks healthy, removing the jewelry is not going to cause any problem. What'll probably happen is your body will slowly start to close the piercing. If it's a healed piercing, it'll kind of seal it up on the inside and then fill outward. So often it'll look open for years after the piercing was abandoned. With newer piercings, usually you'll end up with just a little bit of scarring. Now, if there's a sign of infection or other problem, I would suggest going and seeing your piercer or physician before removing the jewelry. There's always a risk when you take jewelry out of a healing piercing and it's infected of the infection getting trapped inside, which will require more medical treatment, probably lanced and drained to avoid serious medical issues. Now we're belching. Okay. Lastly, sebum. Sebum is a waxy liquid that your body produces to lubricate hair follicles and etc. It'll collect in cramped little places and corners and nooks and on jewelry. Sometimes when you squeeze the piercing, this white, chalky looking cream cheese stuff comes out, and it smells really bad, kind of like a navel you haven't washed. That stuff's completely normal. It's natural. Nothing to worry about. You don't have an infection or any other problem. Just leave it alone. I don't understand why you're squeezing it in the first place. Just leave it be. Well, that's it. That's everything I have to say on this subject today. Do you have stacked nostrils? How cool are they? Do you have any suggestions you could make for other people? Till next time, here's hoping all your piercings heal with ease and without a single issue. And if you're in the Des Moines, Iowa area, I would love to see you for your piercing needs in the future. Have a good day, everybody. Take care, and we'll see you in that next video.